Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. This is a special two-part series Jack Schonely and I recorded with Virginia State Police pilots Jeff Bush and Brian Canada. This conversation highlights their heroic rescue mission that successfully saved 54 individuals from a hospital engulfed by flooding waters during Hurricane Helene. Hurricane Helene impacted the entire southeastern portion of the United States. During this series, we talk about the brave efforts of first responders during the storm and the role that helicopter aviation is playing in the response to natural disasters. This candid conversation explores the critical role of public safety aviation in disaster response, highlighting the personal experiences of rescuers as they navigated challenging weather conditions. Learn about the intricate decision-making process for launching the mission, the vital importance of communication and crew coordination, and the impressive integration of civil and military assets during the operation. We'll reflect on the challenges faced, the invaluable lessons learned, and the crucial support provided by aviation programs in life-saving scenarios. Additionally, we'll discuss community involvement and the contributions of private helicopters during disaster responses. Be sure to catch Lisa Gordon's captivating article that highlights this remarkable mission at verticalmag.com. Get ready for an insightful episode that honors the dedication of our first responders and emphasizes the transformative power of aviation in saving lives. Thank you to our sponsors, Bell, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, and Garmin.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Schonely.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody.
They're advising code 4 on the stop.
Jeff, could you talk about how your crew helped you on that first set down? And how, I imagine, I mean, you're working a lot of medevac, obviously, so they certainly have some training in landing and assisting you, but this is different than landing in a field with maybe an electric line out there at 50 yards. This is very unique. How did they help you on the fly? What did you tell them that you wanted from them, and how did it all work?
It all worked very well. I'll start that way. This was a great crew that I had that day. We had made the decision before we got there that we were going to leave Wayne on the roof, take April to help any of the patients that needed some kind of medical, even though we really weren't operating as the med flight helicopter. But if anybody needed medical help, she was going to be the one to help that. So I was fortunate enough to have both Wayne on the roof and April in the aircraft with me. So when we, and just a little perspective for the water, there was, fire and EMS had pulled up before this water started coming. And when we landed, the only thing you could see was the top of the ambulance and the top of this fire truck.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they abandoned them and came inside and ended up on the roof?
I think they ended up, yes,
Wow.
The swift water rescue people had a couple of boats, and they had a couple of patients that they couldn't get on the roof that were sheltered on the downstream side with the building. And as we're talking about this, I remember that when flight comms had called the second time, they said, the swift water people can't leave that area because of just so much debris that was floating and dangerous for them. So, anyways, back to the crew. They were fabulous. The first group of people that I had taken out, I don't think we did not do anybody on the stretcher that first iteration. The high school was about 3 or 4 miles to the north. Is that what you'd think, Brian? Like 2 miles maybe?
I think it was 2.5. Yeah.
2.5. Okay. Yep. When we had our first crew of people that we were taking to the high school, one of those was sort of an incident commander from the hospital. I think she had everybody's name, and she was definitely, as we were landing, checking people off like we have everybody.
That's helpful.
So yeah, it was great. So Wayne stayed on the roof. April loaded, and Wayne helped load everybody, get them buckled in. My normal thing is, is everybody buckled, or, is everybody secured? And April's like, we're secured. I was like, 2 in the fly, engine instruments good, no caution to fly, no warnings, normal CAD, and whatever fuel. I think I lifted with 120 pounds in the main for the first one. Went over to the high school, and I could not find where it was they wanted us to land. We knew where the high school was, but I think the football field was a little bit distant from the actual high school, and that may have been where they wanted us to land. But next to the high school, or out to the north side of the high school, I guess high school faces kind of east, there was a long stretch of grass. Was that a baseball field or a track that was sort of to the right there, Brian?
It was, softball field, I think. Yeah.
Softball field. So that was the approach. I was like, I'm not sure where they want us to go, but let's see what we can do. And there were some high school staff people standing outside, and, I just did my approach in and set it down. At that point, they were kind of all looking at us, and April was getting people out, and I started waving them over for some help. Because that first go around, April said, there's one lady back here that doesn't want to get out. We're on solid ground, but she's like, I don't want to get out. So, and I think she needed a little bit of help getting out too. But so they came over and helped that first round and kind of got everybody up. I then, made my radio call to Brian. Hey, at Plate 2 departing high school. And boom, off I go back. And I think Brian had just left maybe the hospital. And so when I picked up my second group of people and went back over to the high school, that's when EMS and everybody had pulled up. And whoever the incident commander was for them was very nice. He's like, sorry for the confusion. I'm like, no, I just couldn't find you guys. It's all good. So it was a huge cooperative effort from a whole lot of people, from the Unicoi, Irwin, fire and rescue people, their Swiftwater people. I think, Brian, check me if I'm wrong. I think the initial call was 54 people, 53 people or something. But I think between the others, there was like 64-ish.
Yeah, by the time you added the, I would say there was at least 10 more of personnel, whether they were fire department or the Swiftwater folks, that we ended up picking up also, that they had to get off.
Well, one last thing about this touchdown, and I'm really intrigued by this, and for our helicopter listeners, they know why I'm intrigued by this, because that's dangerous. That is high risk, going into a rooftop that's not made to have a helicopter with obstacles. Brian, did you treat the landing? Did you go to the same spot on the roof, the same direction, everything? Was it identical touchdown on the roof as Jeff, or did you have to change that up because of the tail? What tell us about your actual spot that you touched down and stayed light in the skids?
Okay, so the first spot I went to was the same spot that Jeff. So I was overhead when Jeff was on the deck the first time. So I saw where he was. We briefly talked about it on the radio when he left. So I came in and landed initially where he was. The second iteration, when we came back around, as far as orientation of the aircraft, each time I came back and tried to simulate that exact same thing. Yeah. But was always with assistance with somebody on the roof. I did not trust myself. There were so many obstacles that each time I came in, I fully had to trust it ended up being Wayne for me, that I would come into a hover, clear the obstacles over the deck, and only trusted Wayne to make sure my tail was pointed in the direction that was safe to come all the way down. And we eventually ended up, once other aircraft entered the mix, and to expedite things. I'm not sure, Jeff, if you ever landed on the right, but I essentially would land either on the left side of the building or the right side of the building. So we were able to use two different locations that were equally tricky getting into. One wasn't any better than the other. Fortunately, the wind was helpful. We were able to use the wind where it was and almost keep it directly off the nose. I tell you, there's nothing more fun than pulling some power and being able to go straight up. When you're heavy and you got 25 knots off the nose. That was always nice to feel.
Did you have plenty of wind indicators? I mean, were there flags around and stuff, or was it all
nothing.
by feel and by instrument, or by what you're being told by your instruments?
There was a flag at the high school, which clearly was there was no water over there. So you had a general indication, and I can't say that it didn't change 20 degrees between the two locations, but it was mostly feel. When you got 30 knots off the nose, the helicopter wants to point into the wind.
It sure does.
Yeah.
It's just a big windsock.
So you guys go through some iterations as far as the rescues go. How many total iterations did you do, and how many folks did you guys end up rescuing throughout those different iterations?
So I think we counted up about 5 each, with 3 to 5 people on board. It was Brian and I were finishing up our second iteration when I was departing, and I think Brian was coming in when I saw the National Guard pop over the mountain. So I was like, "Hey, Brian, be careful, National Guard's here." And so I think, and it was good. I'm not saying it's not good that they showed up, but it was great that they showed up, because a couple of those patients that they had on the boats that were floating in the shelter of the building, they had to hoist those guys up. And I'm glad that they came and were able to do that. So it took a little bit for all 4 or 5, because there was actually a third guard helicopter that showed up. It took a little bit.
I got an interesting story about that if you want to hear it. But go ahead, Jeff.
I was just going to say, and then you tell your story. So it took a little bit for them to, change over to air, and for us to have some conversation. It was very easy at the beginning to tell who was, and I forget exactly what it was, Smokey 3 and Smokey 7 or something. It was very easy to tell the difference between those two. That may be your story, Brian. I don't want to take your wind out of your sail, but so it was great they showed up, because we would not have been able to help those people that they had in the boats that they couldn't get on the roof. So
before Brian tells us the story, tell us, Jeff, that you said the communication wasn't there initially. So that means they were not on 123.025, and they eventually figured it out, or is that something they don't normally use? Do you know the background behind that?
I do not know the background of what they used. I kind of figured they were using their military channels or whatever they were talking with the command center that they were operating from.
Yeah.
But when they first came on, they said, "Hey, state police helicopter, are you guys on 123.025?"
Okay.
And of course it was like, "Yep, yes, we are. Go ahead."
Good.
And so they, we explained to them what we were doing and how we were doing it, and where the high school was and dropping people off. So,
yeah, I think talking about the benefits of regional training, regional fly-in training, I think the communication aspect of that alone is worth those regional training events, because you get a chance to directly interface with those folks and be like, hey, what do you guys use on your air-to-air, or do you use air-to-air? Are you using military channels? So I love the idea of the regional fly-ins, and the one that Andrew Beatty planned and organized at your hangar was impressive. You had folks from all over that region of the country, so who were able to go there and do just that. So, for folks that haven't put one on or haven't attended one in the region, I talk about the importance of doing that. It doesn't have to be something fancy. It literally can be hosting a 5 or 6, 10 helicopters over a pot of coffee and talking about just what do we, if we're working together, what are we going to be using to talk? Those investments pay huge dividends.
They do. It was nice in Richmond. We had the Air Guard, and one of the Air Guard that flew the Lakotas were based at Chesterfield also. So we had a good working relationship with those guys, them being in their Lakotas and us having our 145s. When they moved down there from Sandston, Richmond International, that was good to do. So I agree with you. I've been to a couple of those, and I think the last one was up in maybe Delaware, and it was nice being able to talk to not only the Coast Guard, the military, but Delaware State Police, and just Maryland State. All of those people.
You never know who you're going to end up working with on something like that. You don't. And to have a name and some familiarity with what their operations look like in theory is a big advantage.
I agree.
So interesting that you guys encountered that, and love that you guys were able to work through that and actually start communicating on that frequency and coordinate from there. So Brian, I'm interested to hear from your perspective what you saw.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
At some point, you all mentioned we wanted to cover some things that we learned or some mishaps. And I don't want to categorize this as a mishap, but just flat communication. Jeff was correct. We were in close proximity with these Blackhawks, and we were literally just giving each other space. We could see that they had devised a operation. We let them do that. When they cleared the area, the next one would fall into place. So Jeff, it was funny when those Blackhawks originally showed up, I really wasn't aware that they were participating in our rescue. So I jokingly even said it over the air-to-air. Jeff brought it to my attention that they were in the area. And on 123.025, I told Jeff, I said, well, that's fine as long as they just stay out of our way.
They weren't listening at that point.
At that point, I don't think they were listening. But don't get me wrong, tickled to death. And Jeff was right. One of the reasons they came in handy, or they were so useful in saving lives also, one of those patients was a large patient. They were not able to get those patients onto the rooftop. So they ended up in a boat, which just rose with the water level, tied to the back of the building. We didn't have the capability to hoist for the hoist operation. And even so, the size that I heard one of those patients, I don't even think that we could have successfully done it. Power-wise, big power advantage on a Black Hawk over the either one of our aircraft.
It's interesting you bring that up, because that's not something that comes to mind automatically when you think of a response to this type of situation. But now that it's come up, that's obviously something that needs to be considered. And that's, when the integration between, civil and military assets come into play. If you don't have, most agencies don't have access to a heavy lift helicopter. So who's going to probably come in and fill that role, it's probably going to be the National Guard or a similar agency. So yeah, it's an interesting note to take down on that particular response.
Yeah. So, and just to end my story, so there was initially two Blackhawks and Jeff and myself. So we had 4 helicopters and had developed communicating with those two. And again, their names, Jeff was right. I remember it as Smoky 1, Smoky 5, Smoky 6. So you hear I now say 3 Blackhawks. I had just picked up a load of victims, dropped them off to high school, and I watched a Blackhawk come in behind me and land as I took off. When I made the 2-mile trek back to the hospital, at this point I was waiting my turn, and what we had done was kind of developed a stack of out of ground effect hovers closer at a higher altitude, and then the next one might have been a couple hundred feet lower than you, closer to the hospital. I now notice there are 2 Blackhawks in front of me stacked up to land, and I knew I had just left one back at the high school. I didn't realize in the mix of things that a 3rd Blackhawk had entered the mix. And you talk about, it's kind of like sneaking up on a wire. That's no fun. That's no fun knowing mentally that I missed a whole nother aircraft being in the operation here. Now it's funny to talk about it. At the time, I was like, that wasn't.
I understand that.
I didn't like that. But fortunately, those guys were super professional to work with. Everybody was making good calls, giving each other good space. So anyway, that was
just
it.
so we're clear, that was Tennessee National Guard. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah. Wow, that's great.
So in hindsight, if you were to deconstruct that particular circumstance, what would you say would better suit that situation? How could you kind of avoid that situation the next time this happens, if there is a way?
That's a good question. I guess there were so many communication challenges. We were not able to hit repeaters and talk to other agencies. Like I never talked to State Police Virginia dispatch, just because really they weren't helpful to me, even though the radio did work talking to them. To me, the best thing, I'll go back to some other operations we do. Sometimes we do marijuana eradication, and we have what's called high bird. So you have an airplane that's 8,000 feet, and he's kind of the dispatcher for everybody. Mm-hmm. And he's making calls and giving locations or movements of aircraft. To have somebody that would have been in charge of, hey, everything just changed, guys. Make sure everybody's aware that another aircraft just entered the mix. How that would have went down, I guess there's different options on how that could have. But as you can see from my experience, it would have been pretty important for me to have been able to identify and let everybody know, yep, I'm 100% aware that a 3rd aircraft showed up in the mix. And we didn't have any chain of command. I didn't have a supervisor that was calling the shots. The guard could have assumed that we were in charge of the operation because we got there first. I don't know, until we relinquished that and said, hey, you guys are in charge now. It's your state. We're here to assist you. Some of that communication could have gone and been helpful. I'm not sure.
I think it would have been nice because we couldn't have had a high bird that day because of the ceilings, but it would have been it would have been super helpful to know, and maybe the first 2 didn't even know that the 3rd one was on his way. I don't know, but if when they first made communication, I think we somehow established that, yeah, there's two of you all here, there's two of us here. If they would have maybe said, hey, we've got a third inbound helicopter, that would have been helpful too. As Brian was explaining that was something that popped into my head.
Makes you wonder if they even knew that you were there before they came over that ridge line. Did they know that Virginia State Police is there? Probably not. They're just showing up and going, whoa, there's two birds down there working that roof. We didn't know that. I mean, and it just adds to this whole conversation about in an emergency, in a critical moment, there's going to be things like this happen, and having a pre-established way of communicating and setting up some sort of sequence of landing, that'd be, in a perfect world, that'd be really nice. But like you said, Jeff, you couldn't even have a high aircraft because there's the ceiling. So is there other ways to do it? Maybe having somebody that's on, having somebody on the rooftop that has a handheld 123.025 handles the air boss thing. I'm just throwing ideas out there, but in live time, there's no time for that. It's good to talk about it now, and get those wheels turning for other people that are listening, and for ourselves, and for you guys still in the game. But it seems like it should be so simple, but it's not. It's not in an emergency, not when lives are at stake and seconds matter.
And when you're talking, jumping states and different EOCs, it was a whole lot of people trying to do the same thing right at that right critical time. So it is difficult.
On the exact same roof.
Yes.
It's not just like you guys are cruising around and they're in the area. It's like everybody's coming to that rooftop. They've been assigned that, that's their mission.
We're talking a hospital, it's not a big hospital.
Right.
This is a rural hospital that, is one floor. It's I don't know how many beds they actually have. I remember that when we first got the call that they had 9 patients that day. So it wasn't that big of a hospital.
I think of myself in the guard's shoes, and I think one thing that could have been helpful if they would have checked in and reported their position and said, check in as a flight of 3. We're here to assist you guys at this location. How can we mix in?
But see, they weren't a flight of 3 at the beginning. It was only the 2. And if we made 5 iterations, it was like on that, between that 4th and 5th iteration that third one showed up.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think one more thing that this highlights is the value of debriefs, getting to sit down with the folks that you were there and talk about what they saw and what you saw and what their experience was. That way they can learn from, their experience that maybe they didn't realize you guys didn't have knowledge of their positions, and vice versa. I think those debriefs come in huge in these types of incidents. Is that something? And I realize for you guys, you guys had your hands full still between what's going on in Nashville and just regionally, the resources that are being pulled in different directions. But do you think at some point, once this thing slows down, you guys will have a chance to sit down and go over this incident with the other folks?
I think it would be great if we could.
Yeah.
I really do. Maybe we'll have to start working on that hard now that things are calming down. I don't think that's the right word, but
understand what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be extremely valuable to have the two of you with Wayne, April, Jake talk to some of those guard folks, and maybe get somebody from that hospital that you plucked off that roof involved in that debrief conversation. And man, think of the things that would come up in that conversation. Everybody would walk away with going, oh my gosh, I learned something today. Man, next time we're going to do this differently. And it just establishes a relationship that it's hard to explain to people that haven't been in critical incidents. That debrief can establish relationships, establish protocol, establish training, establish all sorts of things. Communication being the big one, as you both clearly described. That debrief is a must. That should be a high priority for everybody. I'd love to sit in on it just as a fly on the wall and just listen to that, because the learning would be phenomenal.
Thanks to our sponsor, Garmin. From flight displays with wire aware power line alerting to autopilots with hover assist, Garmin avionics solutions give helicopter pilots the safety of flight tools they need to fly with total confidence. Find out more at garmin.com/helicopters.
I think this could happen anywhere in the country. Maybe it's not a hurricane, maybe it's an earthquake, or maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a terrorist incident you're responding to. Yep. We're going to find ourselves in a situation where we're working with assets we're not familiar with agencies that have different protocols than we do and different ways of doing business. So I think anytime we can learn from something like this and adopt those philosophies and protocols into our own personal responses, I think is valuable. So thank you guys for sharing that with us and sharing your experience. These are the kind of things in my mind that really highlight the value of our aviation programs. Citizens look at what we're doing and oftentimes they complain about the noise, they complain about the cost of these programs. And this clearly illustrates how valuable and important these programs are and the fact they need to stay. If it wasn't for you guys in that time and place, who knows what would have happened, So I think it's critically important for folks to be aware of the positive aspects of what we're doing. And that's illustrated through your professionalism. The response that you guys made out there was outstanding.
John, how many times on this podcast have we said, how much is one life worth monetarily? You can't put a price on that. And we talk about that all the time, whether it's law enforcement side, search and rescue side, firefighting side, it doesn't matter. How much is one life worth? Yes, Virginia State Police spends a lot of money on aviation assets. How many people in over 50, people would say, well, it's worth every penny. Those people would tell you it's worth every penny. And you have to put yourself on that rooftop. That's how I feel. The people, the bean counters and the politicians and the people that are making the decisions for money need to put themselves on that rooftop in Irwin, Tennessee and say, is aviation assets, are they worth it? Yes, they absolutely are.
They are.
Every penny.
April had a story for me. She was the oncoming nurse this past Saturday when I was leaving, and she had gone to church the week before, and this lady just came up to her randomly after church and said, "Are you April Boyd?" And she said, "Why, yes, I am. Were you involved with the rescue in Unicoi?" She said, "Yes, I was." She said, "My son is a TAC team member, and I'm assuming he's part of the swift water rescue that was there." She said, "I have never been, even with him being on the TAC team, I have never been worried about him losing his life until that day."
Wow.
Like you said, what is one life worth?
I think typically you consider the swiftwater rescue teams being capable of getting to the different locations they need to get to. But just watching the video that I saw that was broadcast in the news, you see floating debris, logs, airplanes, cars, fire trucks, everything floating down. Those Zodiacs with the little outboard motor, it's not going to make it through that.
And that's what they said. There was too much debris for them to motor away from there.
Yeah. So the helicopter in this position is the only tool, the only machine that, in my opinion, is capable of doing what was done. So kudos to you guys for, again, your professionalism, for showing up to do what you did that day. Absolutely, absolutely amazing. Can you talk about some of the reactions that have come as a result of this mission? Some of the positive, I don't call it fallout, but positive reactions you've gotten from local politicians, state politicians, and what is needed, I guess, from you guys to continue to get support for these programs that you're a part of?
Well, it didn't take long to see the excitement, we call it, up the chain, all the way to the governor's office. And in fact, you weren't there, Jeff, but the governor of Virginia, he came and visited our hangar specifically with the intention I think it was 2 days after this event. He specifically wanted to come to our hangar to meet Jeff and myself and Wayne and April and Jake. Unfortunately, Jeff was trapped back in North Carolina. I think the rest of us were there, and I was off the next day. But it was pretty clear to me that the governor was thankful that things worked as they should have to have moved assets into position to be able to do what we did. Because there's a lot of times at our base we are on one helicopter. We have one helicopter for maintenance issues or for whatever. But it was pretty clear to me that politically they saw exactly what you all just described, is that, yeah, we spend a lot of money on this stuff, but this is exactly why. And I was thankful for it. It reassures us that we're doing something that's worthwhile.
Yeah.
I try to.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal that a governor comes to a hangar.
Sure. Oh yeah.
That doesn't happen regularly. That's something that I'm so glad he did. I think the Tennessee governor should be next to visit that hangar.
It's funny that you say that. He while Governor Youngkin was there talking, I just came by just to visit him. I wanted to shake his hand because I appreciate who he is as a leader. But he told us a quick story about Governor Lee, I think it is, out of Tennessee. Mm-hmm. He said shortly after that, he was in contact with Governor Lee via text message, I think it was, or phone call. And Governor Youngkin said that how appreciative Governor Lee was, and the statement was Virginia State Police to the rescue.
Wow.
And it was in his state.
Wow.
So short and sweet. We I think politically they both were very aware of our capabilities, and where we're not on the news, or we spend a lot of money, but every day, fuel's expensive, maintenance expensive, but hey, 60 lives.
Yes,
I don't think I'll go in the rest of my career and be able to touch anything like that.
Oh no, that's just an incredible event that you guys will. That's going to be your legacy. I hope there's never an opportunity that you ever have that's even close to that, just for the sake of the victims. But that, those governors watched the same videos that you were watching, John, and they were going, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Who are these guys? Oh, that was Virginia State Police and Tennessee National Guard. Wow. Look at what those helicopters did for those 60 people. It's incredible. It's incredible. It's very impactful. And that's going to go a long way in the future. I would guess that Virginia State Police, the next time they ask for some new piece of equipment, I would guess it's going to be an easier road to hoe than it was prior to this rescue. It shouldn't happen that way, but I understand why it happens that way. We all do. We all do.
Yeah,
there's money going in millions of directions. We get that. I mean, there's other things besides helicopters, but in this situation, for this very high profile event, those helicopters saved countless lives, not just that mission. I mean, other missions that are making the news, by private people and military people and other law enforcement agencies. But that's great that they're recognizing your crews, you and both of you, and with Wayne and April and Jake too. I mean, that they're recognizing the work you did that day. I'm really thrilled to hear that.
Yeah, outstanding. On Jack brought up, other things that are happening regionally, and Jeff, being that you're in kind of the epicenter of what we're seeing, at least here in California, that's what's being reported on day in and day out, is Asheville and the response to that. Can you talk about that response and what you're seeing as a resident of the area, and just kind of give us a profile of that?
It's amazing to see the local people helping neighbors, and just in my neighborhood of maybe 60, 80 homes, some neighbors are on the other side that I've never talked to, and just helping to helping neighbors you don't even know has just been amazing. It's definitely quieted down, but there was probably a Chinook that just went overhead. The amount of helicopter traffic that we had for about 2 weeks was just because there are some places roads are missing. They're not even, you can't even look at certain places and think that there was ever a road there. And so the only way to get in is through helicopters and getting those supplies in. We have a fellow pilot there in Abingdon that he's been flying with a private guy and delivering a lot of stuff down here. So the aviation response that people have brought goods and services and stuff in for people that need it has just been amazing.
Yeah. I feel like the best of America is on display right now, from not only the governmental response, but the private response. You talk about neighbors helping neighbors, and I'll go back to my community getting buried in snow. That was exactly what we had. Was you couldn't go more than a quarter mile because you couldn't dig through the snow. There's too much of it. So you literally were banding together with your neighbors to shovel snow off of each other's roofs and just do what you had to do to survive within your small little local community. And what you're describing, Jeff, is kind of what it sounds very similar to me, but in a different way. How neat that everyone's banded together to survive and get through this.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely.
Are you still stranded, Jeff, or are you able to get around? I know Asheville's been one of the places that is on the news probably more than anything. And I remember looking at the roads that were closed, and initially it was like zero getting in and out of there, but then they started opening up. Is that continuing right now, or is it?
It is continuing. The power, for 2 weeks straight, we had a whole bunch of people here from out of the area working on the power, and just amazing to see how many trees and power lines and power poles were snapped and lines down, and you run over these lines on your car, for 2 weeks straight, but they've done a fabulous job at getting stuff up. We hear out of our neighborhood with the creek just to the west, it takes a little bend, and it had taken out the eastbound lane to that road, and they had that bank built back up. And it was 2 spots that were pretty good size. They had that built back up in a week, and at least we can now drive across it.
That's great.
We're still have no water.
Okay.
We've been teased with water twice, but the reservoir that we get our water from 2 Christmases ago had some malfunctions, and we were without water for a week. And I think what the city decided to do, they put in this bypass line. And I was told the other day that they buried this bypass line 40 feet. Now, the regular lines, thousands of that feet have been just washed away. Yeah. This bypass line that they buried 40 feet, 800 feet of that line was washed away.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
So we've only been here in Asheville a little bit over 2 years, but the landscape has changed. It's once in a millennial storm or whatever they say it is. It's not even a once in a generation storm. It's once in a couple generation storms.
Wow. What about you, Brian? Are you where you live, and you personally, are things settled down? Are you safe and secure where you're not? What's going on with your personal situation at your home?
Thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
Yeah, we never lost anything at my home. but not too far from here, we had widespread power outages. And, that's the challenge that's the good and the bad of living rural.
Yeah.
Rural means you got to run power lines up and over hills and over ridges, right next to trees. So the power outages was the most widespread damage. Not too far from here, small town Damascus, Virginia. It's actually in the county that we live in. J.D. Vance actually came and visited small town Damascus within a week, just because it's a rural area, and unfortunately, where we only may have displaced a couple thousand people. That's a couple of thousand of homes and lives that probably not to the devastation in Asheville or Unicoi County, Tennessee. But it was devastating. I mean, there are major roads that are gone for miles.
Yeah.
That will take a long time. Not how long does it take to build a bridge? I think the damage is bigger and more widespread than most people are aware.
I'm sure,
just because it can impact a small area, and it doesn't get the media or the awareness that a larger city like Asheville, North Carolina.
As you talk about the bridge, just thank God it's not in California. If it was in California, it'd take us 5 years to build one bridge. So the fact that you're not here is a good thing. But the challenges that come with the rebuilding process have got to be immense. The one thing, Jeff, I'd like to come back to you on and talk about before we close out here is the private helicopter response to your area. What was described to me was really interesting. People talk about the private response with R-22s, R-44s, small helicopters, and why that was so important was because a lot of these areas are tiny. The little LZs are so small that you probably couldn't get a larger aircraft in there. So you almost need these little R-22s and R-44s to get in there and do the job that's been done. Can you talk about that and what you've seen?
All I know is the airport was inundated with helicopters. I do know, I think it was on the news maybe 2 nights ago that they interviewed somebody, and I can't remember what it was he was flying. I don't think it was a Robinson, but he said exactly that. Some of these LZs were so tight that you're not getting a Black Hawk in there. So loading up what you can in these small ones and getting into these tight LZs, that's the only way people were getting any kind of water, bottled water and just basic living essentials. So it's and I've heard of, I think it was in Statesville, maybe, they were kind of staging there in fixed wing aircraft and going to certain places and dropping stuff off, whether it was a grass field or something, I'm not sure, but because there was no other way to get into these places. It's just, it's very joyful to see how many people wanted to lend a hand and how many people from out of state. My wife works at a retirement community, and since we were in Virginia, some of those retirement communities have called and said, "Hey, we've gathered all this stuff. We want to send it to you guys." And
wow.
They fortunately were doing pretty good, but have sent to some of the other retirement communities here in Asheville that weren't as fortunate. So it's the amount of people. I don't ever want to go through this again, but I won't say that it's nice to go through it, because that's not the right word, but to see the love that other people have and how much they want to give is very heartwarming.
Again, I feel like the best of America is on display.
That's a great way to put it.
It makes me proud to be a citizen of part of a country that cares so deeply about the folks within, that they're willing to band together and do what's needed to be done to make sure that the folks have what they need. and then proud to be a part of this helicopter community as well, because it's the best of what we have to offer as well. You know, whether it's a smaller 22 or a Black Hawk flying in to hoist people off of a rooftop, it just, everything in between has been really neat to see these communities come together and what we have to offer come to bear. So, man, it's really, really great to hear these stories and to witness this, you know, and I feel bad that I'm so far away and able to help, but it is neat to see, you know, everyone chip in their own ways. We had a bunch of other topics to discuss, but man, I told you guys time would fly by, and it did.
I don't have my glasses on, so I can't even see what time it is. Oh yeah, we're getting paid overtime for this, right?
It's only been a half an hour, Jeff. Yeah, it's only been 30 minutes, Jeff. It went by. We got about 90 minutes to go.
Jack, in closing, any thoughts or things you'd like to bring up before we kind of walk out?
Yeah, that story is amazing, and it doesn't surprise me that it happened, but at the same time, I am so impressed with the courage, the skill, the coordination, the determination under very trying conditions, both personally and professionally. I mean, you know, we know what it's like to leave your house when there's an earthquake and go into work. You know, you're leaving your house in the middle of a hurricane, you're going into work. That alone is something that most people will never appreciate or understand, how difficult that is to leave your loved ones and go to work to save others. But both of you did that without hesitation and with great professionalism. And I just want to say that, you know, Wayne, April, and Jake aren't here on the podcast with us, but boy, please send on the Hangar Z's appreciation for their professionalism and work ethic and everything, because I think the two of you would be the first to say you couldn't have done that without them. I mean, could you have? Yes, but the risk would have been incredible, and maybe not where you might not do it. So the crews were huge, but to both of you that I'm able to look at and talk to today, I just want to thank both of you for what you did. You made all of us in the law enforcement aviation community very, very proud, and I hope you continue to get recognized for what you did, not just that day, but every day. But certainly that rescue is very, very unique, and you were doing things that aren't in the everyday expectation of a law enforcement aircrew. You know, landing on a rooftop that's not made for a helicopter to land on it, to take 60 people off with two aircrews. That's not something you even think about, you know, but yet you were thrown into it and you did it safely and professionally. And so, thank you personally. And from the Hangar Z, thank you for what you both did. And please pass on to April, Jake, and Wayne, the same thing, the same feelings. We're proud to have you here. And I'm so thrilled this worked out. We talked about this almost immediately upon seeing some of that footage and hearing about it. We said, we need to talk to that crew right there. that is just for our own selfishness, just to see you and talk to you and learn about it. But for all of our loyal listeners, this is going to be one that everybody's going to really be fascinated by and enjoy. So thanks again. And to keep up the great work in Virginia.
Well, thank you very much. I know, I feel blessed that I was actually there to be able to help out, because, you know, I'm sure you all know that there are more than just us willing to come out and do this, and that do have that skill. And I know we have them with Virginia State Police, and there's others elsewhere. So
sure,
I'm blessed that I could be there and help out.
Yeah, you guys have a highly professional organization. It's been really neat to see, you know, firsthand when I was there, your guys' organization and what you guys did, and then to sit here and talk with you guys and hear about your response to something so devastating has been great. I just want to touch on what Jack said real quick. We talk about the importance of flight crews and how it takes an entire crew to make something happen. And this really illustrates that. Recently, I was talking to somebody about how our industry's changed for the better over the last 10, 15 years. And I think there used to be this this line in the sand for aircrew members. You don't cross over this line and talk about pilot stuff. And I'm not going to cross over this line and talk about your stuff. And I think that's changed. And it's highlighted in what you guys just described, because these crew members stepped out of the role of being a paramedic or a flight nurse and into the role of a crew chief and cleared your tail for you and did things that were required of an aviation crew member, not of a med crew member. So it just shows how that culture has changed and how it's benefited our industry as a whole. So I love that and excited to hear these stories continue as our culture continues to evolve and improve in that way. So on that, Brian, any closing thoughts before we step out of here?
Just thankful, I give glory to God that for all the things that could have gone wrong that day. And there were a bunch. I mean, it was risky business there for, we were out for about 2.5 hours. I'm just thankful that it was a safe operation. I piggyback off what Jeff said. We've got other folks that are trained and very capable of doing the same thing we did. It was just our day, and I like to live a humble life. We jump around. You said this was laid back. Hangar talk would be, I had my hero time. All this was hero time.
Yeah.
But I choose, or I at least try to choose, to live a humble life, and thankful to get to do what I do. Because as you all both know, it's a pretty cool job.
It is.
To get to do what we do, and from the viewpoint we have, I'm thankful for it, and it turned out well. So thank you all for having us.
Virginia State Police is very lucky to have the two of you, and the rest, but really lucky to have the two of you. Well done, man. Really, really well done.
Yeah.
Thank you all for having us.
Yeah. As Jack has said, and I'll close on this. Thank you guys very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you guys in person at some point and buying you guys a beer as a thank you. So
right on.
Until then,
sounds good.
We'll catch you later.
All right.
See ya. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thanks to our sponsor, Garmin. From flight displays with wire-aware power line alerting to autopilots with hover assist, Garmin avionics solutions give helicopter pilots the safety of flight tools they need to fly with total confidence. Find out more at garmin.com/helicopters.
Bell is proud to sponsor Vertical Helicasts and their vision to hold meaningful mission, safety, and best practice conversations in the helicopter industry. The lessons learned from these conversations will undoubtedly shape the future of both new and veteran helicopter operators.
Thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
As we wrap up this episode, we want to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Virginia State Police pilots Jeff Bush and Brian Canada for sharing their extraordinary experiences during Hurricane Helene. Their heroic efforts in rescuing 54 individuals from a hospital overwhelmed by floodwaters showcases the critical role of helicopter aviation in disaster response and the unwavering dedication of first responders in the face of adversity. We hope this conversation has shed light on the intricate decision-making and teamwork that goes into such life-saving missions. The challenges faced by these brave men and women remind us of the importance of communication, collaboration, and preparation in high-pressure situations. If you'd like to dive deeper into this remarkable mission, be sure to check out Lisa Gordon's captivating article at verticalmag.com. Thank you for tuning in to the Hangar Z podcast, where we honor the dedication and courage of those who serve in aviation and public safety. Remember to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with others who appreciate the incredible impacts of aviation in our communities.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.